boundless, just like that God upholds all things by the word of his power, and he upholds by him all things hold together. It's an unending source of from God that he creates and gives to us in an unending stream.
Jim?
Water has a significance throughout Scriptures. You'll read in the prophecies of Ezekiel, in Psalms. You'll read in the prophecies of Zechariah. And the concept of water used in prophecy is the concept of basically it's God's abundant provisions. It's the sustainer of life. And so, you can go on a hunger strike maybe and last a while, but you can't go without water. I mean, you will dry up and die pretty quick. But water's always been the sustainer of life, and this sustaining of life in the Old Testament is running from the temple, which is the dwelling place of God. And it's running between the temple and the altar, and the visions that Ezekiel sees and Zechariah sees. So it's the provisions of God basically to sustain our life. So God's going to sustain our life, make all the provisions, and it does have, it's said it's for the healing of the nations. And so what you've got is you've got God doing everything necessary to take care of you and to provide for you for all eternity. And that's that flowing water, that crystal water that only God can provide.
Okay. That's talked about a little bit in John 4:14 when, the water springing up into everlasting life, Anybody else on that river? Go ahead.
Yeah, Jim brought up Ezekiel, and I'm just going to read, because I think that's a real key point there, is the following up that prophecy of Ezekiel, unless you've already got it there.
No, go ahead.
But
I don't
Ezekiel
have that one.
47, and verse 7, he said, I went back and saw the bank of the river, very many trees on one side and the other, and he said to me, the water flows towards the east and goes down to Arabah, enters the sea, the water flows and the sea will become fresh, and wherever the river goes, every living creature that swarms will live, and there will be many fish. For wherever the water goes, the water of the sea may become fresh, so that everything will live where the river goes. I think that's the key emphasis of new life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what it's providing for us. It's allowing us to have that everlasting, that foreverness. Anything else on verse 1? Russ?
When we study this, we all, I think, tend to just speculate on what we think it is. And it's interesting that he says that this is from the throne of God and of the Lamb. And when I think of the Lamb and I think of water, I think of the cleansing power of baptism.
Yeah.
And then you read that it's talking about healing of the nations. And I'm not saying it's baptism, but in my mind, I'm kind of thinking, is it symbolic of the healing nature of the blood of the Lamb that we contact? And does that equate somehow in the heavenly realm as an eternal type of healing that we experienced when we all came up out of the water baptism?
I think that when it talks about God and the Lamb, it's God and Christ and showing their oneness of it. Yeah. And it may be. I think the powers, there's power in that water. Obviously, it's spiritual and coming from God in the baptism part of it. But yeah, I think there's some importance on it. Anybody else? All right. What about verse 2? Verse 2, in the middle of its streets, on either side of the river, was the tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Where else do you hear about a tree of life? Garden of Eden? What do you hear about it? You can talk real loud. Ben's a little slow tonight. Yep. What he said was God, after they ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God blocked their access to the tree of life. Anything else on that? So that's Genesis 2:9.
Yeah, me and Paul actually spent quite a bit of time talking about this after an earlier study. And it's interesting when you look at the Genesis account, there was only one tree he instructed them not to eat of. So there was never an instruction, don't eat from the tree of life. And you think about that and the fact that if they had chose the tree of life first, what God says after they ate the tree of knowledge of good and evil is I have to now keep them from it, lest they eat and live forever. And it makes me wonder if they made that choice first, if he would have blocked access to the tree of knowledge and good and evil. Because would they have ate and lived forever and then gained that knowledge and lived in a sinful state eternally? And that was never God's desire for us. But when they ate and they sinned and they transgressed, now he didn't want them to eat from the tree of life because he never desired for us to live in a sinful state for eternity. And that starts this unbelievable plan that he had to redeem us from our sin to where in heaven that access is no longer blocked. We will live eternally, and that tree of life will be there, and we're not kept from it. But imagine how terrible our state would be if God had not blocked the tree of life after sin entered the world.
Yeah, I think the scriptures start with this, with the tree of life, and then you get to the very end of scripture, and we're all the way back to the tree of life and what it's offering and the access that we will be granted to that. Mark has a comment. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think Jim's comment at the beginning was very cogent about the provision of God for all of our needs. And we begin to see this. Heaven is self-sufficient. That should be an obvious thing. But I mean, it's self-sufficient in every way. We aren't physical beings anymore and don't need the self-sufficiency on the things of this life. But he uses that as the examples. He talks about light. We couldn't survive without light. Well, God is the light, so there's no need for any other light. He talks about food. Well, the trees in the Garden of Eden were fruit. All kinds of food were provided. Well, now we have one tree which provides life for all eternity and also has a different crop for every month to supply all the needs of what's going on here. We have one river that supplies all the needs for those who are there. It's talking spiritually, not physically, just as there were 4 rivers in Eden. And so he's hearkening back, I think, to the examples that he's talked about there in Genesis. And as people would remember, they've heard these stories about Eden a lot. And now he's saying, you've always wanted to go back to Eden. You'll go to something that's greater than Eden, something where God is all sufficient. And we know that, but we don't really understand that yet. But when we reach that location, if we can call it a location, we will understand being completely sufficient in everything that God gives us. And the only way he can express this is to say, all right, you need shelter, you'll have shelter. You need water, you'll have water. You need food, you'll have food. You need light, you'll have not a light. You need protection, you'll have protection. Everything that people want and think of their primary needs in this life, it will be there, but not just in the physical sense, in the spiritual sense. We have a hard time understanding that too. We think, well, God takes care of our physical needs. How does he take care of our spiritual needs? We know he does this, but we don't really fully experience that in this life, but we will.
Yeah, I don't think we'll completely understand it right now either, but I just think it's really neat that in those verses it's talking about all those things, the provisions that you were just talking about, and they're kind of laid out for you. And just having total complete access. And I think that's hard for me to wrap my mind around. No wanting for nothing. Not a single thing. It's just everything is offered to us. I mean, obviously we have to accept it, but it's 100% offered to you. There's no need for anything. So yeah, the tree of life, the waters, the trees, the leaves in this verse, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. What do you think that's talking about? I'm sorry, do you have a comment? You just have to be loud.
Okay. Well, I think that the healing of the nations is healing of the nations. I mean, this is looking at life after the second coming of Christ, and it's the people that make it to heaven are the nations and the elect, and the elect get to eat from the fruit of the tree of life, which is part of their inheritance. But the nations have access because the elect are able to bring it from the city of God out to heal the nations. And I would think that it would probably be something that wouldn't happen very often, but it gets back to the idea of, was eating of the tree of life recurrent, or was it a one-time thing? You know, eating the tree of the knowledge of good and evil seems to have had catastrophic consequences just from eating it one time. You know, God said you're not even supposed to touch it. One source I read said that when they touched and ate the tree of life, that God changed matter at the atomic level, that we got entropy and death and destruction came in at the atomic level because of...
Not the tree of life, the tree of good, knowledge of good and evil, you mean?
What?
Not the tree of life.
No. Just the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Yeah. That caused a change at the atomic level. The tree of life seems... The indications are that you have to have episodic access to the tree of life because they have 12 fruits. You know, they're each for its season has its own purpose, as I think Jim said. And we will have access to the city where the tree is, and we will get it as often as we need it. It's not something that we have to eat every meal. You know, like Adam lived, 1,000 years almost after the tree of life was cut off.
So what's the point of mentioning the tree of life, the fruit, and the leaves, though? Jim, you had your hand up.
I think one of the things that Jeremy is, when we look at Old Testament prophecies and Daniel, about the coming of the kingdom, and all nations will flow to it. So all humanity will flow to it. So all humanity will be that our God's people will assemble again in heaven. And I think this is pretty interesting because we are from different nations. So you can have individuals, but we're individuals from different backgrounds. And I think about this a lot from the standpoint that I was blessed to be born in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. But I'm broken in so many ways. Sin has broken me. Our society's broken me. I've allowed myself to be broken. And I'm all busted up. I've been forgiven, but I'm still all busted up.
Yeah.
Now, somebody living in the Congo, they don't know where the next meal's coming from. Their lives are in danger. They're suffering things that I can't even comprehend. But if they know the Lord the healing is going to be of the nations. It doesn't matter where you're from. And every person that lived on this earth is broken. And God is healing everything, all people, all nations. And so they used to use what we would consider old type medicines from leaves and trees and pulse, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I think all it's saying is that all that are present in heaven, no matter how broken you've been, God's going to wipe away every tear. There's not going to be pain. There's not going to be suffering. There's not going to be poverty. All the things that you've experienced are healed because God has given you life forever, and you'll never die. And so I think it's a figurative concept,
Yeah.
but I don't think necessarily we understand what if, maybe we do, how broken we are.
We
And
probably don't, but
But how broken we are and how great it's going to be to actually be whole again.
yeah. Drew?
So I don't know that we can know everything that it means, but I think there's some important characteristics about this tree that need to be pointed out. So one, it's bearing all kinds of different fruit. That's not a typical thing that we see for a tree. Two, our very idea and understanding of trees is that we know that trees go through cycles, right? So trees lose their leaves, trees sprout new leaves, trees are constantly turning over and changing, but there's something about this tree that keeps it new, keeps it afresh, keeps it from going through those cycles.
He's holy. 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 Awesome. Holy and awesome. Awesome. And we know that He's great. 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 Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Yes, He's a deliverer. 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 Awesome. Deliverer. He's awesome. He's a provider. 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 Provider.